full name is James Hamilton Flockhart, spelt F-L-O-C-K-A-R-T. I was born on the 17th of September 1931 at the Merredin Hospital in Kitchener Road. My father's name was Ian Hamilton Flockhart, and my mother was Nance Flockhart, I suppose. Right, well, as most people would know, I guess growing up on a farm's quite different from growing up in a town. But out on the farm we were 25 kilometres roughly from the town of Merredin, and there was myself, my parents and myself and some workmen at that time, and 12 months and a couple of weeks later twins were born, which were my brother and sister, Ian and Mary. And so there was a bit of catching up to do as far as age difference to go. And we were put in touch with wildlife, farm animals and things like this at all times. We were taken for walks in the native bush and shown wildflowers, wild orchids, which were always of interest to me. And there was other things like live farm animals that we helped to drive sheep and things like that. And when we got a bit older, we milked cows and fed horses and all sorts of bits and pieces like that to do with farm life. The horses were used in those days for towing farm implements and for riding as well. Now, the horses that were used for towing farm implements were generally Clydesdale horses, which is a breed of horse which is very big boned and very strong and have very large hoofs compared to a riding horse or a race horse, for argument's sake. And I guess it was an interesting time that the horses were kept in a large yard, which was virtually a stable, part roofed over, so that they were protected from the weather and stuff like that. There were troughs in there for feeding them, and they were fed with mixture of chaff and oats and stuff like that, which was prepared for them by the workmen who distributed it to the horses in varying quantities for the whole day, every day. And the work horses were generally in teams of, say, 4 or 6 or 8 who worked in parallel all together, and they worked for half a day at a time. They used to take them out in the morning and they'd work till lunchtime, when a changeover team of the same number of horses would be taken out and the other horses were brought back, watered and fed and so on. And that was done during the ploughing and seeding seasons. Was virtually a continuous job every day. Yeah, well, that's a story. I was only a little boy then, and but you know, used to love running around, and I guess most kids do. And I got out of the house yard, and no doubt my mum was looking after the twins, and I ran over to go to the horse yard, which was about, I suppose, 100 yards or a bit more away from the house. And as I was running over there, my mother came out chasing me and calling no doubt to come back, which had deaf ears, I didn't hear that, so I kept running towards the horse yard. A workman who was working at the shed at the particular time, he stopped my mum and said, "Don't go over there, I'll get him out of the yard." And he ran over and called me out of the yard, and I came out. His reasoning being that if my mother had run into the yard, she was a stranger to the horses, and the horses may well have panicked or done something like that, and quite easily a small kid, a couple of feet high, could get very easily trampled to death. And he didn't want to see that happen, so he stopped my mum and virtually saved me from getting run down by a mob of horses, because if you get, say there was 20 horses in the yard and they panicked when a lady ran in wearing perhaps a dress or unusual clothing compared to a workman, they may have panicked and run the small kid down without really even knowing what was happening. Yes, sure. It was an interesting time, I guess, for we were doing schoolwork by correspondence at that stage, and so we were home every day, and the prisoners who were around, they lived in quarters that were adjacent, or not right next to the house, but probably 50 yards away from the house. They lived in quarters there with their own facilities and everything, but they had their meals at the house. They were a couple of very nice fellas. They'd been conscripted, obviously, into the Italian army, and had been captured by the Australians while they were in North Africa. And so they were then taken, once they were taken prisoners, they were brought to Australia, where they stayed in prison camps until they were distributed. Because labour was short because of the conscripted troops in Australia, the prisoners were put to work on farms. One of our prisoners happened to be a barber. He was a gentleman with a wife in Naples in Italy, and had a daughter, I think, if my memory serves me right. And the other one was a younger man altogether who had worked for his father on a orchard, grapevine type of place at Siena, which is just out of Florence in the northern part of Italy. And they were a couple of very nice fellas, and we got on really well with them. And in the time they were there, we learnt to speak Italian fluently, because every time there was somewhere they were around, we went there and we talked to them. They tried to talk to us in English, and we tried to talk to them in Italian until we got it all right. And every weekend on a Sunday, they didn't work, and any prisoners of war that were on nearby farms either rode the farm bike or walked down to our place to get their hair cut or have a shave or something like that. And this bloke demonstrated his skills as a barber and etc. And there was anything up to a dozen or more Italian prisoners at our place at any one time, which I'm not quite sure that it was really allowed to be like that, because they didn't like them all getting together in a big bunch. But these guys were all tame as anything. They'd never wanted to go in the war anyway, and as a consequence, their social outing was Sunday morning down to Flock Arts getting a haircut or whatever, or teaching the kids to talk. And so that's about what it was like, I suppose. In a working day, as a normal working type day where they either drove horses or they did fencing, chased sheep, whatever activity was on at that particular time of the year. The fun thing. Yeah, well, that's a pretty good question, I suppose. I suppose fun things for us on the farm were playing games and we used to trap rabbits and all sorts of things like that. And they were all sorts of fun to us. When we were a bit older, we used to trap rabbits, and because there was food rationing and clothing rationing and all that sort of thing in Australia, we used to sell our rabbits that we trapped to people in town who wanted to buy a rabbit they'd buy 2 rabbits or something, and we'd sell them to them for $1 each. And so that was our pocket money. Because if anyone with a long memory that goes back remembers it, that was at the end of the Depression, agricultural depression and financial depression throughout Australia, and farmers were struggling to make a good wage every day and keep the workmen as well. So it was an exercise for us. We'd go out on late Friday afternoon after school, set the traps, go out after tea, pick up the rabbits, and we'd skin them and dress them, prepare them. And you also have to remember there was no refrigeration then either. There were only what they call cool saves, which were Hessian with water running through them to the rafter and through to keep things cool. So we used to put the rabbits in there, and then Dad used to come to town on Saturday afternoon. He'd bring them in and distribute them to our varying customers. I suppose probably getting a ride in the car. But Merredin was an interesting place to come to, I suppose, because we saw lots of people, and sometimes children our own size and people like that, and it was quite interesting place to come to. What my first memory of Merredin would just be that there were lots of people there that weren't around on the farm. It was a interesting place, and I can remember once walking down the street, and when it was summertime, I was 14 or 15 or something like that, and I was get suntanned. I used to get suntanned until I was black, and I was walking along the street one day, and a couple of Aboriginal people came out of a shop and spoke to me as I walked past. And then one of them turned back and looked at me and said, you're not one of us, are you? And I remember going home and telling my mother that, and she was horrified, but it didn't worry me too much. But it's amazing that that were just little things that happened. And Merredin to us was a great long street with Tommy Lake up on one end and Gribble's grocery shop down the other end, and the big hotel. Yes, it was a spectacular building, the Duff's Hotel, which was in Bates Street, virtually behind the post office. And the hotel's a couple of stories tall, had about 40 employees worked there in bars and cooks and things like that. Had a couple of beautiful lounges with very well done outdoors. A spectacular building, and it was built over what was called the arcade. And the arcade was the ground stories, pavement height, down on the south side of the building. And in the arcade there were professional people like dentists, doctors, people that had consulting rooms down the arcade, along with accountants and other people in those professional type organisations. And on the north side of the hotel, it had a story of rooms for the staff. And I think there were 40 odd rooms for staff people there, which included barmaids and, cooks and everyone else. And at the back of the hotel, which is now, I guess, the parking area for the businesses around the area, there were stables for horses the whole full length of the building, so that if anyone travelling through from the goldfields to the city came as far as Merredin, they could stable their horses overnight where they got fed and watered, and they could proceed with their journey the next day. Naturally enough, there was regulations on drinking for kids, so you didn't get much of a chance to do that. But once I turned 18 or 20 or something, we used to drink in the hotel, yes. Our mates used to go there and line up at the bar and have a couple of drinks and sneak out so our parents didn't catch us. And it was an interesting place, but if you ask most older people who've lived in town a long time will remember it as a spectacularly good building. Very, very, very nice bars and nice lounges, and attracted a lot of attention. And I could never understand why the people who bought the hotel were always put on the market later in life. It was pulled down, which seemed a strange thing to do to me, but the people that bought it had other ideas for it, I suppose. And well, harvesting in all my time was done with either a header or a harvester, which are a similar type machine, but they do exactly the same job. They cut the head off the wheat and put the grain in a bin. And in the days when we first started off, when I was a young fellow, all the grain was handled in bags. It got put in a bin on the harvester, and then we bagged it off into 3 bushel bags, which were Hessian-made bags, and we stood them in dumps of wheat in the paddock, about the right size to load on a small truck or whatever vehicle we used to cart them to the siding. And all the grain was done in bags, and in the early stages they were all sewn up, which requires a good deal of expertise, and it's a pretty tedious sort of a job. And I've got a workshop in town here, and in that workshop I've got a box with the needles, the string, the little things for pushing the needles through the Hessian bags and stuff like that. And I've kept them as for historic, what's the right word, I suppose for historic memory. Somehow I've kept them, and I've got a lot of bits and pieces like that. But they were, it was an interesting time, but all the bags were handled manually, physically. And when they were sewn up and full, they'd cut them into the siding. They weighed them on big hand weighbridge type weighbridges, and they lumpers, the wheat lumpers, would run up a plank carrying a bag on their back and throw it onto the stack, and the stacks would be 20 bags high, and they were amazing. And they whenever they lump it through the bag on the stack, they always threw it exactly so it stayed in the one place and never moved. And so it was, and they were skilled workers, but very hard working. Well, actually, sport life in Merredin was not on for us because it was too far to go. So we used to play tennis at Corbell, where there was 4 tennis courts, I think, but they were hard gravel surface, not nice grass ones like they have today. And the people that played rode their bikes or came on however they could get there, got there, walked there and played tennis, and then went home at night time. And I played football for Barracoppin, which was a long way from where I lived, but the difference being that in Merredin there were plenty of players for the teams, and there was towns and railways were the 2 teams that were in Merredin, and they had enough employees, I guess, around the town and around the railway yard to carry 2 teams easily. And I made the discovery that Barracoppin was short of players, and so I went and I played for Barracoppin for, I don't know, quite a few years. And I broke my leg. We hadn't been playing that, hadn't been going that well, and in the semi-final I was playing at centre half forward and broke my leg. And so we then had to play in the grand final without me. I walked down the boundary with my leg in plaster, and I wasn't too happy about that. And I made the discovery then that I thought I was better at administration than I was as a footballer. And so I took on committee jobs and being president of the Bar Footy Club, and got involved with the Football League here and everything. And so I had quite a long career with football district-wise in the end. And it was something I enjoyed a fair bit, and that's about all I can tell you, I suppose. Well, there'd have to be really, and I suppose you got very friendly with your neighbours, and Florence Teasdale was one of those neighbours, the eldest family, elders of the Teasdale family, I think, and she was a great person for working for everything she could help around the place in a voluntary capacity. And I think she was the first person ever made a Freeman of the Shire. she's of course not with us anymore, but however she was a very worthwhile citizen. And there were other people like Mr. Law, Dick Law, who was Shire engineer and I think probably secretary engineer or something for the total Shire. And he was a well-educated man and a really good bloke. And when the junior farmers got going strongly in Merredin, and I got interested in debating and talking and things like that, we co-opted Mr. Law to give us a hand, and he came along and coached the debating team for I don't know, a few years I suppose, and of which there was 3 of us here. There was myself, Phil Cale and Ray Loney, who was a school teacher, and we eventually won the state championship. So we had to thank Mr. Law for his effort into that. He was an interesting gentleman, and he always insisted that when we were preparing a debate for either side, we had to learn all about both sides of the argument, because that way we always knew the answer when the other people argued with us. And our best friends in the debating field were Dudleykind, actually, strangely enough. And the Walsh boys at Dudleykind were very keen, and their father was very keen on debating as well. And so, but we went all about the state to varying centres to conduct the debates. Once I spoke at I was leading the debating team, and I got stuck into the opposition leader of the other team about their argument and how poor it was or whatever it was, and it was a girl who was leading the other team. She burst into tears, and I felt like a cow of a bloke then. However, things like that happen. Sure. Yeah, the swimming pool was a Shire sponsored, well, publicly sponsored and aided much by the Shire with finance and stuff, and pools were sort of becoming fairly common around the place. And when they were building the pool here, it wasn't like today where you've got mechanical machines pick up everything and do everything. But when we were carting the sand to make the actual pool and do the paving and stuff around the pool, my brother and the Dalton boys, who were our neighbours out there, shoveled sand onto a truck, or 2 trucks actually, and brought to town and shovelled it off after work every day until we got the pool built. Now that's a pretty big job. Today you wouldn't get anyone to do it. I don't think people would do it. They wouldn't load a truck with sand with a shovel. And admittedly it was a fairly tough sort of job, but still it was one of those things, and we were encouraged by, I think, our parents and the local community to get on with it. If you want a swimming pool, you're going to put a bit of effort in, and so that's what we did. Christmas time was I suppose Father Christmas was always a popular bloke, and those days when particularly you're a little kid, and we used to hang our stockings out like all little kids used to do, and fish our presents out of it on Christmas morning. the other thing about Christmas time was the sociable side of Christmas time, I suppose, was the Teasdales, who were farmers between town where we lived, always had a Christmas lunch, which was held along the veranda of their house, which had a great big long veranda on the eastern side, and they put on the Christmas lunch, where Bert Teasdale, who was sort of a grandfather to the district, and Mary Teasdale, his wife, they sat either end of the table, and they invited all the neighbours, or at least the ones they liked anyway. They invited all them along to be there last Sunday or Christmas Day lunch, and the boys, the Teasdale boys, Ron, Eric and Co, they used to manage to get a keg of beer from the brewery, which was operating in town then, and they had that in their, what was their dairy, their milk room, a cement brick room, where they had the keg. If you wanted a beer, you had to get yourself in there and get your glass under the tap, and and the Teasdale ladies did all the cooking for the thing, and it was a tremendous day in those days, and I presume that getting there was a big job for some people. Horse and cart, or ride your bike, however you could get there was a great thing, but it was a great thing, Teasdale's lunch on Christmas Day. When my father first came here, he'd been working in Central Australia for quite a while, and he worked for his brother in Victoria and then came over here and bought a farm over here. When he bought the farm over here, he caught a snake, a carpet snake. Now, if anybody knows much about snakes would know from looking at this, this is actually a handbag that was made from the skin of a carpet snake. If you want to see how big it was, that line there, the centre of its back, where it's dark coloured there, and the light coloured stuff as it runs around the snake. The snake, as I understand it, was about 4 inches round and about 6 or 8 feet long. I never saw the snake, naturally enough, because I wasn't born when he picked that snake up. But they scanned it and cleaned it all and everything, and they sent these skin to my relatives, or our relatives in the eastern states, and somewhere some skilled person made this handbag out of the skin, and I still have it as a memento, I guess, of the days when the old man first came here. And it's an interesting piece of material, and I think anybody who's interested in that sort of thing would be very interested in having a look at it. Now, other things. There's a picture of me here. I think I was 21 then. So that's the 3 Flockhart kids when they were, I'd say, probably 2 and 1 or something like that. These cards here were sent to us by the Italian prisoners of war when they were repatriated to Italy after the war was closed up and all the Australian troops had returned, then they returned the prisoners to their home country. And you have a card here. This is to Mary, the old Flockhart, box 22, Merredin, and it was sent from Italy by Giovanni, or one of the prisoner of war. This one's Ian, that's from my brother. And that was sent after the war, so the amount of respect or whatever feeling was left with those guys, with obviously they were not at war with us, they were friends for us and worked for us in a normal working relationship, I gather. But the fact that we could speak fluent Italian was pretty interesting, really. And so I can still speak Italian to a fair degree, but I don't use the language anymore now. But I speak to Julie Nicoletti and people in town here in Italian every now and again, just for fun. I think being special for me living in Merredin is probably brought about by my background as a kid, being made to always do the right thing, and if you didn't do the right thing, you got into serious trouble. From my family brought me into a position where I fitted well into the social life and business life of Merredin, and besides going to every social dance that was around the place, because I learnt to dance old time dancing when I was at boarding school. I went to all the dances that happened here, naturally to meet the nice ladies we saw there, and it was a great place. It was Walgurlin, sometimes in Merredin, Nangeen and New Carney. There was a dance every Saturday night. There was a dance somewhere, and we took of them, and it was a big part of the thing. And I think the fact that I managed to contribute enough to some of the other things in town and some of the business things in town earned me the 5 life memberships of voluntary organisations in town, of which I'm pretty proud to have 5 life memberships, and it's I like to sort of fulfil my obligation to those things and stick with them, and I don't know, I think that's about it, I think. And when I retired from farming, my wife Bev and I had a good discussion about where we were going to go, where we were going to stay. We have a house on the coast, and we thought about going there, but when it got down to the hard, cruel facts of it, we really loved Merredin best, and so we were going to stay here anyway.
So yeah, just moving around in your hands a bit. You can open the flap as well and just show us off what it's made out of. Yeah, that's great. And just rotate it for me, so spin it around. That's great. Fantastic. I'll get you to then grab one of so just hold it there, that's great. Very good.
This is that's one of the volcanoes that are common in Italy. Must be at Mount Etna or Vesuvius or something. This is one of the pictures are from around Naples. This one's also from around Naples. And this one here, I think, came from Siena, where the younger of the two prisoners worked for us.
That's great. Thank you. And the last one is the photo of you and...
That's me, Jim. That's Mary, my sister. And that's my brother Ian.